Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. We're here to talk Seahawks football and the NFL draft, just a couple days away now from the first round on Thursday evening. Keith, should be exciting. This is one of those drafts, and I've been doing this for a while, and you get these once in a while where you just don't really know exactly what's going to happen. Sometimes it's easy to forecast what's going to happen in front of you, so you can kind of figure out if Seattle's going to stick and pick or move around or whatever. And this year, there seems to be uncertainty a little bit around the players that are going to go in the top 17. And that uncertainty kind of starts to come into play, I think, after pick 10. And just kind of the way that the depth of this class is laid out, in that there seems to be some blue chip players, some first round grades in the top 10, maybe the top 12. And after that, it gets pretty sketchy. Players with similar grades all the way from the 12th overall pick into the 40s, which complicates things a little bit. It makes you uncomfortable if you're a general manager and you're Seattle. You're picking at 18 and you've got a player that you really would love to be able to pick at 40, but you need to pick at 18 because you can't find a trading partner to move. And so you just try to take the best player available. You're trying to figure out what your needs are, what this pick means to the rest of your draft, and all that. And of course, everyone else is trying to do the same thing, 31 teams. So welcome in, Keith. Just thought we'd kind of have just a wide open conversation about the draft.
Yeah. Less than 48 hours away from the start of the draft. My favorite time of the year. I love this kind of stuff. But yeah, like you were talking, like the, after 12 or 13, it levels off as far as the quality of player for quite a while. And so if you want to move down, are you going to find people that are willing to trade up? Because in order to trade down from 18, you have to have a trade partner. And, let's say you want to move down to 23 with Green Bay. Green Bay has to want to come up to get a certain player. And if the talent levels off for a while, they don't have any reason to want to move up. And so we might not get as much in trade to move down as you would normally.
Yeah, no doubt. And that doesn't mean that there's not going to be good players available, and that Seattle could get a quality starter out of the first possibly 3 picks at least.
Yeah.
And
all of those players down into the 40s are good players. I'm not saying that. It's just that the value of the player at 20 and the value of the player at 35 is roughly the same, because that's just the nature of this year's draft.
Right. And so there's a couple ideas here. So all 31 managers are smart enough, I think, to realize that that's the way that this is. And to me, it seems like it might change the philosophy or the strategy of the first, 15, 16 picks that come off the board. Whereas I think you're always trying to find impact players and so forth, but you're not going to get a chance to draft again until the second round for most of these teams. And you're going to want to get the guy that you want to come away from the draft with. And sometimes that means that you'll go find players that are typically not ranked on the big board in the top 10. Sometimes you'll go outside that just because you'll try to squeeze a player. For example, maybe you're going to pass on Genty, the running back, who's very talented. Almost every mock you see has him going top 10, top 6, top 5. And there's a chance, though, that instead of the Raiders choosing a running back here where they could get one in the second round that's, not Genty, but also going to do very well for you, They could go get an edge rusher instead. And maybe they do that and he starts dropping. There's a couple of tight ends in this draft that are forecast to be early guys. Maybe those guys start dropping a little bit. Maybe Will Johnson, the cornerback. I've heard and read some things about him and his tackling and lack thereof, being a willing tackler and aggressive and so forth. That's going to turn some teams off. And so players like that will start to drop. Other players that were pegged in the top 20 or top 25 will start rising up. And maybe there's a player that Seattle maybe didn't have a chance on or didn't think that they would have a chance, just like with Byron Murphy in 2024. Maybe there's a guy that drops that it all of a sudden lands in their laps, like Kelvin Banks or Mikael Williams, the edge rusher, even Colston Loveland, Shamir Stewart, Jalen Walker. I talked about that just yesterday or the day before when we did the mock draft. That there are scenarios where some of these players are starting to move around a little bit and may be available. That's kind of a best case scenario for Seattle to come away with a blue chip quality player without having to move up. What are your thoughts on that? And then maybe you could take a second to just talk about moving up. If there's somebody, would this be the draft? Would this potentially create a scenario where Seattle feels like in order to really come away with that really good quality impact starter in round one, they're going to have to move up to go get him, and they've got the draft capital to do it?
They do have the draft capital to do it. That's one of the things that makes this interesting. John Snyder does not move up in round one, but if he's ever going to, this is going to be the year, I think, because he's got 2 seconds and 2/3 that he can use to package with 18 to move up. But who would he be moving up to get? That's kind of the question. Maybe if Shedeur Sanders drops and is sitting there at 10, they move up there.
Prospect we've spent little time talking about.
Yeah. I would hope that it would be someone like Armand Membao. If he was available, at 9 or 10, that they would move up and get a guy like him, because he's just going to be an amazing player at the next level.
Potentially even Will Campbell. I've heard people, some general managers like Membu better as a prospect, as a true tackle. And Will Campbell's going to be viewed as more of a guard prospect by half of the league, at least, right? Even though he's got...
Which means half the league doesn't have him in the first round.
Right. And so he may be the guy that ends up dropping, but also Seattle could benefit from that.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
In this particular draft, there's I think there's 13 players that have a first round grade, according to Schneider. That's not many out of 32. And so that's another reason why you might see these guys moving up for one, because if you want a first round quality talent in the first round, you're going to have to maybe pick in the top 12, 13, 14 picks, unless the team starts drafting guys that we don't consider
yes
in that group of blue chip players,
right,
which is
players like
Amari
and Hampton, or Derek Harmon, for example, or Kenneth Grant, guys like Jackson Dart, the quarterback. Maybe there's a little teeny run on the quarterbacks, and that helps Seattle.
Yeah, it really does, because that means that the blue chip players start to drop, and so it creates an idea where they might move up. Now, who are the blue chip players in this? Who are this 13? I don't know. You don't know. Only Schneider and his team knows who they have, but we can guess on some. We probably would get 10 out of 13 right. But who are the others? Like a couple of years ago, Derek Hall was someone that they had a first round grade on, and I don't think any draft media person had a first round grade on him, but Schneider did. And so when he was available early in round 2, they went and got him because he was the only first round grade left on the board. So
Yeah.
it made a lot of sense.
So let me read a couple of things that Schneider said in this process in the last few weeks regarding moving around. So he says every year is totally different. Having those 5 picks in the first 92, it allows you to maneuver a little bit depending on how other people see it. That's one of the things that I'm trying to do down here. And he was speaking about the owners' meetings. He's got, 5 picks in the first 3 rounds, 5 picks on day 3. So initially you're like, yeah, we're going to take 5 really good players, Schneider said. But then you get into a situation where it's like, all right, that guy's a starter. We should probably move to go get him if you can. It depends on how other people see these guys. But yeah, it allows us the ability to just be more free throughout our draft process. There's a couple other things. Hold on here.
Ooh, that guy's a starter. You're right. What he's saying there is, ooh, we move up, 4 spots. We can get Kelvin Banks to be our starting left guard this year and maybe our starting left tackle next year.
Right.
That's worth giving up one of the other draft picks in the top 100.
So
and
let's say they move from 18 to 14, Keith.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like our pick 92, for example, in the third round?
Well, if 18 to 14, the difference is 200 points, right? So pick 82 is worth 180. And so they'd probably have to give up 82 and 172. 172 is worth 22.6. So you'd only give up 22.6 extra points on the draft chart.
Which is the premium to move up in a first round, I would say.
Yeah. And sometimes you would have to overpay a little bit in the first round. So it might be you have to give up 137 instead of 172. That's worth 37 and a half. So now you're overpaying by 17 and a half points, which, that's the equivalent of the 184th pick as far as giving up extra. Maybe you could get something back in the 7th round or late 6th or whatever. But at that point, you're kind of just, this is all like very little meaning. But yeah, that's what you're looking at. You're not looking at giving up 50 or 52 in order to move up to 14.
Right. And you still have another pick there in that range at 92.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Just an incremental move to go get a guy. And it doesn't have to be Banks. It could be any one of the guys that kind of falling into that area outside of 10. I could see that. Here's an interesting, so a couple of things. Schefter reported yesterday. He is noting that the Seahawks are one of several teams who have showed interest in trading back. John Lynch came out today, the 49ers, in a 49ers interview, indicated he feels there are many teams in the first round that would like to move back. And I wrote a side note, which could indicate some difficulty finding a trade partner willing to move up to 18.
Well, and if a lot of people are wanting to move back, maybe that is, okay, we can move back. Someone's willing to pay, but they're not willing to pay normal, right? So let's just say where do you, looking back at the trade chart, right? So the Seahawks are at 18, and they want to move. Let's say they want to move down, and they think, okay, let's identify the Chargers at 22. So they're going to move down 4 spots. The difference there is 120 points, right? So then you're looking at, find the nearest Chargers pick to 120 points, and it's going to take,
somewhere early in the 4th round, mid-4th round.
And so, that's going to be in the 4th round. Because a lot of teams want to move down, and they're like, you know what, if we don't move up with you, we can move up with someone else, and pay less. And so instead of getting a 4th round pick, you get a 5th round pick. You get pick 158 from them.
Yeah. Pick, I could see that too.
A future pick wouldn't bother me.
The one
because
thing that I kind of wanted to do with this, Keith, is like, and I'll do another little tidbit here. This is kind of with Brock Heward, and kind of paraphrasing John. My takeaway in listening to all of these interviews with John and the level of detail he went into on that show on Thursday, speaking of last Thursday, is he's saying, hey, here's what we do. We put Vice President of Player Personnel Trent Kirshner and Assistant General Manager Nolan Teasley on different jobs. We're reaching out to teams. We're putting all those scenarios together on the draft. In the draft, we make sure that we have every number of who to call. And here's the deal that we set up ahead of time. And Brock Heward said, I think they're going to be very active.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the
and
deals,
it doesn't have to be in the first round.
Yeah, a lot of the deals that you end up seeing going down on draft day were discussed and kind of agreed upon before the draft. It's not a matter of, ooh, we're on the clock and people start calling. It's
sometimes,
hey, if this player is available when we get on the clock, Minnesota wants to move up and get them. And so we've already worked out the details of what that trade would be. And they know what player it's about. And then it's just a matter of making it happen if it happens.
So I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So we'll get more into moving around a little bit as we kind of talk about some different rounds as part of our discussion today. But I just want to get like, what would make Seattle go make a pick at either 18 or slight move up, maybe slight move back? Here are some players that we've talked about and considered between 11 and 25. Cornerback Will Johnson, Jihad Campbell, Matthew Golden, which I'm kind of interested in, actually. Nick Emanwari,
Kelvin Banks,
Malachi Starks, Donovan Ezekiel, Jade Barron, Shamar Stewart, Omarion Hampton is starting to talk about first round stuff. Josh Simmons, Tyler Booker, Kenneth Grant, Josh Connerly, Emeka Abuka, Siobhan Ravel. Then there's guys that are really kind of starting to come into play in that 11 to 17 range. Gray Zabel's talked about possibly edging up into there. Kelvin Banks, Colson Loveland, Mikael Williams, Derek Harmon, McMillan, the wide receiver. What do you, out of those, what are a couple of players that you think Seattle is going to be enamored with and they would select?
So if they're moving up instead of down, I would say Will Johnson comes to mind. Maybe McMillan, the wide receiver, if he falls far enough. Tyler Warren is super interesting because he's just an athletic freak at tight end. But
can we pause for a second and talk about him? Because you and I have been somewhat, not overly, but just kind of, I would say, somewhat dismissive of the idea of them selecting a tight end in the first round, Tyler Warren or Colson, just for a couple of reasons. Warren, primarily because he's pegged to go earlier than Seattle is selecting, and he's never really been considered, a really legitimate target by Seattle. But the more I listen to all the pundits out there talk about the first round, the way it's going to unfold, and the pressure there are on general managers here to make selections that make sense, value-wise and so forth. There's only a certain amount of blue chippers. I think Tyler Warren does go in the top, say, 15, but he's going to be close, like to Seattle. And if Seattle's like, dude, this dude is a once-in-a-generation tight end, and we can go get him for like a third-round pick, let's go get him.
The thing that's interesting is, like, is he once in a generation? Because who was the guy last year that the Raiders took?
You know what I mean? A guy that's just once in a draft, for sure.
And Kyle Pitts was only a couple of years ago, taken number 4 overall. It's once in a draft as far as getting as absolutely elite athlete at tight end. But at some point, like, these guys, is there value there? How much is tight end valued within the league? And the top tight ends in the league, if you look at, guys,
that doesn't matter. How much is tight end
Kyle Pitts went
valued
number 4
in our scheme on our offense?
Yeah. Well, that is true, but I mean, it doesn't matter which team. If it's a guard and they're really good, they're still not being drafted top 10. Nobody in the league values guard that much. But tight end, it's possible. I mean, we had, like I said, Kyle Pitts went number 4. Was it Brock Bowers last year went, I want to say, number 8. Like Tyler Warren's probably going to be one of those guys that goes top 10. If he's not, if just it works out because this is a weird year and whatever, and he starts to fall and he's there at 12, you go, when is the next time the Seahawks are going to be in a position to get a guy who is that much head and shoulders above the other players at his position, not just in this draft, but compared to other teams in their division? This is like going and getting, one of the elite tight ends in the league, but getting them on a rookie contract and all of that. So maybe that becomes valuable. You're right. You and I have been kind of dismissive. I've been especially dismissive of them taking a tight end because I think it's a luxury pick. It's something that you take when you have most of your roster put together and you're like, this is going to put us over the top. But that doesn't mean that John Snyder feels that way.
Or, he's one of 12 blue chip players. He's only one of 12, let's just say, first round graded players, and they feel like they want to come away with one of them. And he's the guy. He's the highest rated player on their board. We don't know. I mean, he could very well be. You just don't know. Do you
really think he's rated higher on their board than Travis Hunter?
No, but you know what I mean. As far as guys that could get in range.
I know. You know what I'm saying? You're like, he could be the highest rated player on the board. I'm like, yeah, that's going to be Travis Hunter. And there's no way Travis Hunter is getting out of the top 4.
Yes. But there is, interesting scenarios where Jalen Walker could be a guy. You mentioned Shedeur Sanders is a guy that might fall in this draft that could surprise
it's interesting.
Some people.
Shedeur Sanders not long ago was the consensus number 1 overall prospect. And I'm sitting here looking at NFL mock draft database's consensus big board, and he's dropped all the way to 8.
Mm-hmm.
Projected, like the consensus pick is number 9 to New Orleans. But
if he goes past New Orleans, he could go into a fall.
Yeah, this could be Aaron Rodgers, who went 22.
The soonest he could get picked would possibly be Indianapolis at 14.
Yeah.
And then Seattle's the next quarterback potentially team. I think, the issue is Seattle's kind of taken itself out of first round need on the quarterback position by doing what they did with the contracts that they have and the players that they've got in-house.
I don't think it matters. If Sanders drops,
especially with him, because he needs a year.
If Sanders drops and he's sitting there at 13 and you've only got to give up a 3rd round pick and you've got 2 to go up and get a guy that you feel is your quarterback of the future, you do it. Who cares who's on?
And that's the key, quarterback of the future. I've heard a lot of people that I value as far as their opinions that do the draft full time, that feel like if Sanders was in last year's draft, he would have been the 6th or 7th quarterback taken.
Wow. See, that's damning. I mean,
it's damning, right? He doesn't have a first round grade on a lot of boards.
The 6th quarterback taken was Bo Nix at 12, and that was an unprecedented, crazy year for quarterbacks at the top of the draft.
Yes.
And it left Seattle with the best defensive player in the draft, which was kind of awesome. But yeah, I mean, that is kind of, if he would have, that means, okay, if he's going to be 6 or 7, that means he might have been available last year when Seattle picked without having to move up.
Right. But that shows you, though, the demand on the position this year.
And it also shows
They're just
how good last year's class was
right.
and how good next year's class could be. Because typically it's, you have a year that's really good like they just had. The next year tends to be terrible. Guess what? It's kind of terrible this year at quarterback. And then next year could be good again. I mean, we'll have to wait and see because, those guys, there's projection, but a lot of guys fall on their face going into their final year and don't live up to the hype and fall completely out of contention for first round picks and that kind of stuff. So we'll see. Other players will rise and we'll see who would have expected Cameron Ward to be the consensus number 1 overall pick?
So if they're staying at
Nobody.
18, Keith, there's probably 3 or 4 players, 5, let's just say 5 players that I would feel comfortable, sticking and picking and not like throwing my shoe at the TV like my dad did one year when he was upset about a player that they picked. I would stick and pick for Colston Loveland. I know we disagree a little bit on that, but I think he's worthy there. I think Jihad Campbell potentially, Matthew Golden, wide receiver, Starks,
Jihad Campbell,
safety.
Really? An off the ball linebacker.
Yeah, he's special, but an unlikely positional value, but I could be talked into it. Derek Harmon, Shamar Stewart's got some.
Shamar Stewart's a guy that I would be okay with. Mikael Williams would be a guy I'd be okay with.
Yeah, somebody's kicking around a little bit of scuttlebutt on Stewart as far as off the field concerns. I just want to, I'm sure the team would do homework on that. Derek Harmon, I hear, is getting first round grades, and he's okay. He's lower on most people's boards, but I think that they would take him at 18. If you really go look at his body of work and the way that he operates and project him into a Mike McDonald defense, I think that they would seriously consider that, along with Kenneth Grant.
See, Kenneth Grant, I would be more okay with.
Why is that?
Because Kenneth Grant gives you the size, the bulk to be a true
Derek
nose tackle.
Carmen's like 314 pounds, something like that. I think maybe even more. Let me go look.
Yeah, but a true nose tackle needs to be 225 or greater.
I get that.
And Kenneth Grant he played at like 240. And so that to me, and plus he was dominant at 240, like not just not being moved against, against the run and doing nose tackle things, but he's explosive enough as an athlete to get upfield and cause problems for quarterbacks. Derek Harmon's smaller and he's more of a 3 tech.
Derek Harmon's at 310 currently.
Yeah. So to me, he's more of a 3 tech than a nose, and man, I'd rather have a nose right now based on Seattle's roster. I'd rather have a true nose tackle, and that's Kenneth Grant. What about Gray Zabel or Nick Inamware at 18?
I would feel more comfortable with Gray Zabel just because it aligns better with what we currently need, and I think that Gray Zabel is going to be a really decent starter for a long time. I am not completely convinced that Nick Emanwari has got a first round grade or even close to it. I think he's going to end up being a guy that comes off the board in the 30s somewhere, maybe even 40.
Wow.
When it's all said and done.
Athletically, he's such a unicorn that someone takes a shot on him.
There's no question. But there's always this super athletic dude in the draft that's not such a great football player. And he's okay at football, but he's got some room to improve. Oh, yeah.
So totally. Looking at the consensus projection for these players, Gray Zabel, the consensus projection is Seattle at 18. And Enamware, who's listed one spot above him on the big board, his consensus projection is number 32 to the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
So even though
Enamware is kind of an Eagles player, I'll be the first to admit he would be an amazing player in that defense, and they can afford to develop him.
Yep,
I like it.
I don't want the Eagles to get another super athlete. They've got enough. They honestly need to share.
Okay, so day 2 targets.
So
Now this could be Seattle at 50 or 52. Could be moving back slightly. Could be moving up into
if they
maybe the
move
40
back in
range.
round 1, especially I would see them moving up in round 2 to 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 do that and getting a guy that they um, don't want to leave, round 2 without
Right.
knowing they need to move up. Because if you move back in round 1, what are you going to get? A third round pick?
So I'm going to
What do
give
you?
you some names that we, and I'll say a few other people that I value opinions on, have projected or mocked to Seattle at
Mhm.
certain times throughout this process. And I'm just going to have you stop me when you want to talk about a player or you think Seattle would pounce. Luther Burden, wide receiver. Trey Amos, the cornerback. Maxwell Harrison, the corner. Donovan Jackson, the interior lineman. Let's talk about Donovan Jackson just
Let's
really
go to
quick.
Donovan Jackson. That's a good place to Trey. I almost stopped you at Trey Amos, but I was kind of trying to let you do more than just one name before I stopped you. Um, yeah, you skipped over the guy that I
I'm not going to
uh
skip. I'm just throwing them out randomly. I don't have them in any particular
oh
draft order or anything. Yeah,
um
Donovan Jackson to me is a guy that's going to be a consideration, and by all accounts, a really good dude, a captain level type leader on his team, a guy that shows up all the time, that has been available for games and plays at a high level, albeit an average. I'm going to say average, like a league average guard level, but in our offense, I think that could be doable with the wide zone stuff that we're going to run.
yeah. Um Honestly, he's a guy that if they do something else at 18, go defense, grab a nose tackle or a corner or something, and yet they're like, okay, we need to move up and get that guard. That's going to um, fix our O line this year. He's a guy that I wouldn't mind having them move up and take. Like he's
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
player.
He guys come in right away and start for you at left guard, and he would be a starting level left guard for you.
Yeah.
Jalen Milrow.
Um, that's an interesting one. So
Yeah,
Jalen Milrow, the quarterback from Alabama, is a unique athlete. He is not a great passer. He has a lot of work to do on his mechanics for him to be a consistently accurate passer in the short to mid range. He's got a great deep ball, super athletic, does the RPO stuff as good as anybody. Um, but to
he'd
me,
immediately be the best running dual threat quarterback in the NFL if he can throw. If they can get him to where they could, and
you're
I'm
gonna put
talking like 2026. In
you're gonna put him
2026, he
above
could.
Lamar.
As far as his legs are concerned, yeah, Lamar's, he's not young anymore,
That's
and also he's had
yeah,
an
but he's
ACL. And
so dynamic.
no, totally,
Um,
and he knows the NFL and knows the NFL defense. I'm not saying that
yeah,
he's immediately going to be that or better. I'm just saying he has potential, and he
as a
already
pure
is faster.
runner, um, Jalen Monroe is like drafting Lamar Jackson. But Jalen Monroe is not the passer that Lamar Jackson was coming out of college.
And Lamar Jackson wasn't good.
Yeah, he wasn't great at throwing the ball coming out of college, but he just generated explosive plays so readily that Baltimore took a shot on him, and
Mm-hmm.
it paid off because he's developed as a passer. Um, and he just every year he gets a little better as a thrower. Um, yeah, there are
This would
times
be
when
taking. Go ahead.
there have been times when Lamar Jackson has tried too much to be the pocket passer and has not used his talents because he's trying to be that. Um, but even that, he's finding that balance and getting better at being a pocket passer when he needs to be. Um, Jalen Milroe has a lot of work to do to kind of be able to go along that path. I don't think he is a starter in year one, but damn, there's a future there, maybe. I mean, he's like taking Jalen Hurts in round 2 if you're the Eagles. Because he might
you could keep a third
over,
quarterback in Jalen Milroe on your roster and use him in certain packages to run the ball. And you know, I don't know. I mean, you don't want to use him as a gimmick guy, but also I wouldn't mind it because he's a weapon on your roster. He's going to be sitting there.
And if you establish that he's your gimmick guy, he's your slash, you know, if you want to go back to, you know, Pittsburgh's days, with that action going on where they would bring him in. But you know, if you want to use him as that, okay, you're going to get a chance. He's going to get the chance to run. He's going to get in the game a little bit, not much, but a little bit. And then later in the season, when you need it, you bring him in, you make it look like you're going to do another one of your runs, and you throw the ball because he actually is a quarterback. And
right.
You know,
it'd be fun. But is it going to be fun at like 50 or potentially higher because he's going to go in the 40s? Do you make a move? It's hard to say yes because it's seemingly a luxury, but again, I don't count quarterbacks as a luxury at this range. Like if they identify him as being the future, then you just do whatever it takes to go get him. It would be a weird
quarterbacks are never a luxury. Not like I mentioned tight end was a luxury pick. Jalen Milroe will feel like a luxury in 2025 because he'll be the third quarterback on your roster, and he'll be a guy that's a, you know, gimmicky. You get him in for 3 or 4 plays a game is all. But he's a guy that because of his potential, and you're drafting him for upside, not current. Because of his potential,
you're drafting him for the right to coach him.
Yes,
essentially.
And if you can do that, then you can get you're willing to get a guy that a year from now might be the most valuable player on your team.
And also an asset, tradable asset. Okay. How about a running back, Travion Henderson, or a tight end, Mason Taylor?
I'm not real sold on Mason Taylor. I was a little early on in the process, and the more I've looked, the more I've been like, he doesn't really fit what Seattle wants to do. He's, you know, pass catcher. He just feels like
think that he does, but that's just me.
Like, the Seahawks want to be tough and physical, and Mason Taylor's tape feels very finesse. And maybe that's selling him short, but I just don't see it.
A little bit. He's willing. And he's got
Travion Henderson
like up here. So
is a guy that if the Seahawks picked him at 50, it would piss off so many people, but they would not know that they're getting such a good player.
Yeah, especially in the scheme.
Yeah, he's a guy that is going to be really good at the next level. And honestly, if the Seahawks take him at 50, and you're looking like they could have had, you know, another lineman or a corner or whatever, and they took a running back, but
right, especially if like Jaden Higgins is on the board and they chose him. Here's the deal with him for me is like, okay, Ken Walker has been injured a lot. Ken Walker's never had the impact that we all want him to have, and we want him to have it. It's not like we don't want him to be on the roster, but he's getting to the point now where he's on a 1-year deal, and he hasn't been healthy completely all the time. And we've talked ad nauseum about running the ball in this offense and having it be effective and doing it the right way. And I'm not so sure that the current regime feels like he's the guy that can carry that load. And as we know, Zach Charbonnet is great and all, but he's a certain style of running back that is okay suitable for the wide zone scheme, but not premier and dynamic. And Travion Henderson would give you that, plus some receiving out of the backfield. He's just kind of an explosive guy that could burst through the hole and be a a touchdown threat from anywhere on the field. Other than when Ken Walker's available, we don't have that on the roster.
Mm-hmm. So would you rather have that, Henderson, or Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa? Because there's
that's a
not a
squirrely
huge
question.
there's not a huge difference in value on the
Mhm.
consensus big board. I really like Caleb Johnson because he's
I favor
huge
those.
and
You
powerful
and I
and
both
just
favor
freaking
those kind of.
runs people over. I
Yes,
love that. I love that.
I do too. But we don't run a gap scheme anymore. We don't run a power scheme. Now we're going to run some power, but we have Zach Charbonnet there for that on occasion. But we're going to run that wide zone stuff like 65% of the time. I think Trevion Henderson is a better scheme fit, and that's kind of what they're trying to do this year, Keith. I think is they're trying to marry the roster to the scheme better than they have in the past. In the past, it's been so disjointed. The offensive line is, a 340-pound guy here, but a 198-pound center here, and nothing's ever really completely matching and in sync. And I think maybe you would take Henderson only in that he's going to give you a little bit more value to the scheme, as opposed to Caleb Johnson. I love and I like better personally. And it would be something that I would be comfortable with, a couple of years ago. But now I'm not so sure.
I don't know. The idea of watching him run people over, just that's football. I'd love Sun. I mean, I already
Caleb
love
Johnson
Sundays.
is good enough to run a wide zone scheme. I'll just say that he's not. It's not all power with him. It is. He's got quick feet, a good burst, good decision making, patience, all that. So that's a tough one for me. Yeah.
So let's drop down to in 80 and 90, 82, 92. And some guys down there in that range that we're kind of looking at. Jared Wilson, the center from Georgia, is a guy that I've seen people talk about. I am not enamored with him. I don't think he's a massive upgrade over Oluwatimi. I would much rather have them.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think so either.
I would much rather have them spend 52 on Tate Ratledge, his teammate at guard, who's a better fit schematically and just a better player overall. But people have been talking about Jared Wilson. I just want to throw mine out there. Jalen Royals, the wide receiver out of Utah State, in that range would be freaking phenomenal. Tall, fast, instantly gives you that deep threat that they lost when they traded DK.
Terrence Ferguson, the tight end, Josiah Stewart, the edge player from Michigan, I think. Andrew Makuba, the safety, Demetrius Knight, a player that you really like at linebacker, is going to be in this range. Kevin Winston Jr., I think the safety with a tremendous amount of upside that has been injured. Jack Besh, the other wide receiver that I think both of us like.
Yep. Yeah, I think you love him, but he's basically like, if Cooper Kupp was in this draft,
yes.
He's kind of that way. I like Royals more because of his speed. I think he can play outside better. But you know what? I'm not going to complain either way.
Yeah, and I think you're getting to the point in the draft too at 82, 92, where you're just really honestly looking at best player available, regardless of position. And hopefully they've got the lineman figured out and you're not reaching for a guy like Jared Wilson. I agree. He's a center only, and I don't believe that he's a starter. I'm not seeing it. I think he's a solid lineman, but you're right. I don't know that he's better than what we currently have on the roster.
He feels like selecting Oluwatimi again. Guy who's a little undersized, not quite physical enough, can get the job done at times, but isn't really an upgrade. Isn't the guy that you are like, yes, this is who we need. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I've heard his name come up with Seattle a number of times because people are projecting there. if they're going to pick an interior lineman in this range, I would much rather have them pick Marcus Imbo,
Interesting.
who is not a great fit for Seattle schematically because he's more of a phone booth, beat the guy in front of you than a lateral mover for an outside zone. But he's so good as a run blocker and just driving people away from where they want to be that, to me, he's more valuable. Even if he's not a great scheme fit, he's more valuable to this team than Jared Wilson is.
So some day three stuff, some players that I really like that are kind of Seahawky players that we've talked about over the course of the last 3 months. Some of them a little while ago, others more recently. The running back Damian Martinez, I think, is a great prospect on day three. Ty Robinson, the defensive lineman. Noel Williams, the corner. Will Howard, potentially at quarterback. I like him. Gunnar Helm at wide receiver.
Jackson Slater, interior offensive lineman out of Sac State.
Yes.
He's more developmental, but such a really, really high ceiling. And they've met with him 3 times. So that tells you a little bit that he's a guy to keep an eye on. JJ Pegues out of Mississippi. Is it Pegues?
Pegues.
He's 340-pound nose tackle. That would be a day 3 pick. Kobe Bryant, a cornerback out of Kansas, because you can't have enough Kobe Bryants on your
God
team.
Help us apparently. All. Yeah, Billy Bowman, the safety, Torrey Horton, the wide receiver. We talked a little bit about yesterday that we couldn't figure out how to get onto our mock draft roster, but he's a guy that I'm sure is going to be on our board as far as a producer at that.
I bet he goes sooner than the draft media thinks.
I agree. I think he's in the back end of the 3rd round at the earliest.
Yeah, and they're projecting him like 4th, late 4th type of thing. I think he's a 3rd rounder. He's just good, and they're just overlooking him because he's Colorado State.
I agree. Danny Stutzman, the linebacker, Devin Neal, the running back that you chose the last mock draft, Jordan Phillips, the interior defensive lineman, Bashul Tutin, I think the running back that with a lot of speed, Chase Lunt, the offensive tackle with move skills that is going to be applicable in our new outside zone scheme. Mitchell Evans, the tight end's got some great dual value in day 3. Teddy Buchanan's a player that I think I really like at linebacker. That's just all about creating havoc and action. I would love him just for special teams because he's just a player that just makes stuff happen. And there's a few more. Jackson Howes, Dante Thornton,
Jalen Lane, wide receiver out of Virginia Tech.
I think he's going to go earlier. There's some wide receivers with some serious speed, top end speed. Take the defensive top off.
Speed.
Yes.
And Tulane safety Caleb Renshaw, because
I'd like him.
Talk about elite speed with like 4.29 in the 40. But is not a complete football player. Has a lot of room. Has a lot of growing to do.
I've got him on my list here. Yeah, for sure.
But damn, does he look like a Seahawk with that speed?
Now with 10 picks, that if they drop back a few times and pick up additional picks like you did in your draft, you came away with 12. They could select a player like Seth McLaughlin, the interior offensive lineman from Ohio State, who had an ACL injury, missed some of the season, could miss some at training camp and so forth. He'd be kind of a red shirt guy that plays center, that fits their scheme. But it's hard to put a grade on him because he's just not going to be ready.
He missed almost the entire season, and so there's not a lot of tape on him from last year. It's all from 2 years ago, and he won't be ready for this year. So you're drafting a guy for the year after.
Potentially. I think his injury was in October. We just don't know. We don't know exactly where he's at is the deal with him.
There's a few players like that in this year's draft where they're available like a round later than they should be because of an injury.
Yeah. And we already talked about
Siobhan Revel Jr.,
Kevin
the
Winston
cornerback.
Jr.
Yeah. Like Revel Jr. is a guy
that's a guy.
If he hadn't gotten hurt, I think he's top. He's a blue chip player. He's one of those top 12, top 15 guys. But because he missed most of the year after an ACL and all of that, he might be sitting there in the 40s.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, this is a fun draft, a very interesting draft, just because I think the value is in the middle rounds, and the good news is we've got some picks there. Everything from 50 to 137 gives us some operational value to move around in this draft and go get and identify players that we want to get. They also may select a punt on this class and make their picks through 37 or 137, or maybe they try to move up a little bit into that 110 range where there's a void there, because after that there's just it's hit and miss like every other draft. But 2026 is a draft I think you'd want to accumulate some ammunition to move around, and they may elect to come away with 7 players in this draft and feel fine, and then stockpile some picks later on. I don't know that to be true. It's just once in a while that's the way it works.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot for something you probably haven't prepared for. One player, just give me one name of an undrafted free agent you want to see Seattle sign.
Okay. I would say Ajani Cornelius. Are you familiar?
I am not. That is not a name that rings a bell.
So he's a guy that could go in the 7th round. It'd be kind of one of those priority free agent, pickups at the back end of the 7th round that you kind of do once in a while. But he's an offensive tackle from Oregon State. Doesn't get a lot of press, but he's an athletic guy that moves around in space really well. He's a true tackle. He's not going to move inside, but he needs some time. He needs some functional strength work and that sort of thing. But he's a left tackle. We don't have a lot of left tackles, especially when you sign tackles onto the roster. They're swing tackles, if they're going to be backups. And to identify a true kind of left tackle prospect that could come in and kind of have a year, probably practice squad, would be interesting and fun for me because of our contract situation with Charles Cross. And it's also a scheme fit kind of a thing. So it's just really future-y. But that's a guy.
Since I put you on the spot with that, I'm going to throw a name at you too. Will Shepard, wide receiver out of Colorado.
I've heard that, but I've not done any research on him whatsoever.
6'3", 205, runs a 4.59 40. So it does not have speed, but very fluid route runner for a guy his height. Really, really nice vert, broad jump, 5 or 10 yard split on the 40. And so therefore explosive in short area and that kind of stuff. Can get open with a 6'3" target. Something to keep an eye on. I like him.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I like it. I mean, you don't have that elite speed, so you better be damn good at something else. And if he's a route runner, if he's very precise, if he's a good worker in the locker room, if he's a good leader, if he's a good special teams guy, you never know when you bring in guys that are undrafted free agents, man. Seattle's been really successful, and being really successful is like 1 or 2 guys stick every year. So this is a long shot in the NFL, really. But practice squads are now 15 players. There's a little bit more opportunity there. That's all you got to do, right? Just hang around a NFL practice squad for a while, make a little money, get an opportunity, and once you get it, you got to get it. You got to go.
Yeah.
So, and you never know. I mean, the mental aspect of this game is the most important aspect of this game, and the only aspect that you never ever really understand about any prospect, because we just don't have that information. But teams do, and teams work really hard to try to figure it out, because if you can figure out a guy's brain, you can figure out a guy as a player. And I know they really try. We just don't have any idea. Like all the players that we've been talking about in the first round or whatever, there's a player up there that we might undervalue for whatever reason and think, they wouldn't consider him or whatever. Maybe it's Jihad Campbell, or maybe it's Matthew Golden, or could be anybody, right? Tyler Booker, for example, a guy that we've maybe dismissed as maybe not a scheme fit, Tyler Booker. But man, that dude has all the intangibles you would want as a football player. He's got them. And so that could be enough to tip him in favor of in the scales, right? And we just don't know.
Yeah, so he may not be a great scheme fit in terms of what you see on tape, but damn, he's the hardest worker on his college team. He's going to make himself a scheme fit. Yes. He's going to come in and work in a way that you would not expect players to work, and change his body in a way that will make him elite in Seattle's. Right. What we've seen it.
I know. I'm laughing because that's exactly the rub with him. So you kind of nailed him. It's like, it's one of those things where Tyler Booker doesn't necessarily fit that wide zone profile. He's not athletic. He's super unathletic. He's the 5 percentile unathletic at the combine, but he's a first round draft pick for a reason. He's from Alabama. He's a team leader. He works as hard as anybody else. He's first player on the field, last player off, all of these things. Right. And so there's a lot of value to that, to an NFL GM and a coach.
Yeah. And I mean, guy comes in, works, and it's hard for guys to change their body in terms of like stuff, but we've seen it happen. And we've seen guys that come in, with a certain body type. Maybe they're too really high cut and not strong down. They don't have a strong base, and then they spend the first 2 years of their career basically building that, and come away just, now suddenly they have a great anchor on the offensive line, and they're so much more than they were when they came in. It happens. It's rare, but it happens.
Yeah. So as we head out of this show and into the draft, the next show that we record, Keith, is either going to be a response recap show at the tail end of the draft, or after day 1 or day 2. I know we've got a couple of guest appearances, or at least one scheduled. I think two. During the draft process. I don't know exactly when those are going to be, and as soon as we know, we'll share.
I am actually due on Dan Vians' show during round 3. Okay. I'm gonna jump on, and
Dan asked me to join that as well, and cool. I just don't know the details like you do.
Yeah, and so it's a thing where he's got other people coming in, but he's going to do it during the draft, so it's going to be a lot of live commentary. It'll be fun.
And then Hawk Zone Rundown has invited us on as well. I think that is a recap show on Sunday.
Yeah.
So final thoughts, Keith, putting it all together.
The draft is really, really fun. Enjoy it. Don't get too wrapped up in, oh my God, the sky is falling. If you're on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it now, I guarantee you they will hate every single pick Seattle makes. Don't fall into that. Enjoy it. Have fun with it. Learn about the guys as the Seahawks draft them. Do a shadow draft if you have the time and have the availability to do that. That's always really fun to come and look at how you do after the draft is over.
So when you do that, Keith, do you try to make the pick before Seattle makes the pick in
Yes.
that particular spot?
So I have when the Seahawks go on the clock, I have a pick in mind. Like I know who I would pick, and if the Seahawks trade the pick, oh well, too bad, let it go. And if they make a pick, then okay, I write down who I would have picked in that spot. And because it's based on the same exact position, the same exact available players. What do you have? And it's fun to look back on and go, wow, I picked this guy a round before the NFL did. But then you go back 3 years later and you're like, okay, how did I do compared to with actual NFL success? And it really gives you kind of a feel for like how your draft class would have been. Um, I've had some really good ones and I've had some terrible ones. So yeah, it's fun. It really is. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Would if you're into the draft and you're into doing that kind of stuff, I encourage you to do it. It's a fun exercise. Kind of put yourself on the spot a little bit, and don't be afraid to laugh at yourself afterward when you're like, "Wow, I really suck at this." Because the first few shadow drafts I did, I came away looking terrible, and it was a skill too that I had to develop to get better. But still, it's just fun. It is. Just enjoy it.
It is, and that's really the point of this entire thing, right? This is entertainment.
Yeah.
This is fun. This is not supposed to be heavy. This is supposed to be a distraction from all the other things, and treat it as such. Go have get together with your friends. I know that my dad and I used to have a gig, that we would have penciled in on the calendar months in advance. That we do, a couple of days of the draft, and now they've turned it into 3 days and separated the first round from the first three. And so it's a little bit more difficult to kind of have a barbecue around and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
nonetheless,
they've kind of killed the draft party the way they do it now,
yes,
because it
yes,
used to be the first, second, and third rounds were all on one day, and it was Friday night. So as everyone, you're off
yes,
work, you come home,
right.
get the barbecue going, have a few beers, and it was fun. And then by moving it to Thursday, you got to get up and go to work in the morning, and it's only one
Right,
round.
right.
And they've just
And it
sort of
still
killed it.
lasts 3 hours.
It still lasts forever. Although they did shorten the time that teams have to pick from 15 minutes to 10. Um, at one point it was 12 in the middle, but now I think it's 10 this year. And that will help. Um,
Yes,
it's really annoying when a team, especially like the first overall pick, they
you
know who they're
know,
going to pick,
they know.
and
Yeah.
but they sit there for the entire 10 minutes for no reason whatsoever, unless
Well, and
they're just
here's my
expecting
theory.
someone to come in and offer them a ton.
I don't know that that's the case, but I do know that it's all about money. So it's about advertising, and it's about opportunity. So even if they don't go to commercial, they've got banner advertising and all sorts of other ad placements and so forth. It's all about the network asking teams to delay that pick.
Yeah.
And it's a coordinated dance. The whole thing is, and
I mean,
it's just
that
one of
makes
those things.
sense. If you go to games, if you are there's a guy on the field who's got orange sleeves in every single
The
game.
timekeeper.
He is the guy whose responsibility is to tell the officials when the network is ready for them to
Yes.
restart play after a
Yes.
timeout,
When they need to
when
go
they
to
go to
commercial.
commercial.
Yes.
And I freaking hate that guy. Because and every NFL fan should, because you're just waiting for that guy to wave his hands and tell the officials to start. We're like, just play the game.
Yeah.
But
It is very distracting and annoying in person when you're watching. Now at home, you can leave the room, you can go to the bathroom, you can go make a drink, you can go do this and that and the other in between.
and they
And it's
show that guy on TV. They don't. But he's
I've seen him a
there.
couple times on TV. I've seen him. I've
Really?
seen him.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
But
They
yeah,
typically
no, I
don't
get
show
it.
the guy with the orange sleeves on TV, and he's He is my
So are you
nemesis.
going to have a quiet weekend other than the guest appearances? Are you just planning on riding this thing solo?
I am. My plan for this is that so during the fall, my other job is, or my first of three jobs, if you include this one, is as a teacher. And during the fall, I am really good about getting my student stuff graded and back to them very quickly because every week there's a Seahawk game and I can sit there and grade in the commercials and the lulls of action and that kind of stuff. During the spring, I lack that routine opportunity to get my grading done, and that will happen on Thursday, Friday, Saturday
That's
during the
funny.
draft.
There's a lot of downtime, man. There just is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm going to do the solo thing myself. My significant other knows that this is my time, and also I need certain food groups represented. Even though I'm going to be by myself, I need some brats, I need some beer, I need some burgers. It's 3 days. Come on, I need some chips and salsa, and maybe a little bit of candy, and it all comes together. It's fun. It's one of those things where we do a lot of work, Keith. Like you and I put in a lot of work, and half of it, less than half of it, is on camera. Most of the work is done
Oh
prior to the
God,
show,
when it's
right?
this season, like this time of year, I'd say 80% of it, 90% of it is off camera, because we put in so much work behind the scenes to get ready
Yeah,
for these shows, and I don't mind it. Like
I don't mind it either. It's not work.
I don't get to sleep as much as I'd like, but I don't care. This is fun and I enjoy it and it gives me something to look forward to when I'm having a rough day at work or whatever. I get to come home and talk to Bill about, running backs or go home and just cram some film and watch that because I love that kind of stuff.
The nice thing about this show, and we've been really consistent over 9 seasons now. We're getting into our 9th season.
Which is crazy.
It's crazy.
That's
653rd
crazy.
episode today. And we've never missed a week. And some of those weeks have just been Keith because I've been gone. But
Not many.
not many. Not many. But the thing is it's we just have a conversation, really. I mean, we do prep, but we do minimal notes prep, and we don't script anything. And so we just show up. We don't know what we're going to talk about ahead of time, and we just start.
Well, we know what
in broad terms.
We have a topic, and we research the topic independently, and then get on here and do this. And it's been an absolute blast for 8+ years now, and I'm in no way ever thinking of stopping doing this. This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you got time for a little story?
Okay. Why not?
After the Super Bowl win, right?
So
that next year,
2014 of February 2014.
Yeah. So after the Super Bowl win, I between the Super Bowl win and the Super Bowl loss, like that, the draft in between there, I at the time was still doing the sports writing thing, and I got approached by Bleacher Report to do. They're like, "Hey, we need you to cover the Seahawks on the 3 draft days, and every time there's a pick or a trade, we need an article from you."
Wow.
And it was like, so it's like 750 words for every pick or trade. And I was like, sure, whatever, because it's money. And anytime you get a chance to freelance and make some extra money in this career, you do it. And of course, the Seahawks had a pick in the first round and traded out of it. So I got to do nothing on day one. And I'm sitting here watching Kirk Popejoy, who's a friend of mine, who was the Steelers beat writer at the time, just cramming through stuff and sweating and whatever, and I have nothing to do. I'm literally just sitting back, cheerleading everyone. Come on, yeah, you can do this, because we're all in a like a chat thing. And then day 2 comes around and Seattle's only got like 2 picks on day 2. And so I literally feel like I've done nothing after 2 days. And everyone else has been like, it's been this mad stream of work. And we get to day 3 and Seattle has 8 picks and makes 4 trades on day 3. And I honestly don't remember most of the day. I
Wow.
got to the end of it, and when I was done, I was so tired. I was literally shaking, trying to
Oh my
keep up.
goodness.
Just, I mean,
Wow.
I was burnt. I was spent. There was nothing left. Um, and all I could think of is, I'm like, why does John Snyder keep trading that? Stop freaking trading down.
Do you remember a single player that we drafted from that draft?
Oh God, no. I
I
really
am
don't.
so into this current draft. And over the
Ah,
years, Keith, we memorize and look at hundreds of prospects. The cool thing is we know half the NFL, or, more than half. Pretty good. I mean, where players,
mhm.
you don't know necessarily where players go. You don't remember that, but the player. As soon as you remember the name, kind of where they are, and if you were interested or not. But man, I seem to compartmentalize this stuff because I have a hard time remembering individual drafts now. I can remember players better than the drafts themselves. But I couldn't tell you who we drafted in 2014. Just couldn't. I couldn't. I
Well,
mean, I would know the players if you showed me a list, but I can't think of them off the top of my head.
I'm looking it up. I want to see who it was that I had to write about that year. I don't remember any of the things that I wrote. I just remember um,
That
I
you were
remember
12th Man
that day was
Rising editor.
awful.
So if everybody doesn't remember, Keith was 12th Man Rising, and you guys churned at least what, 2 articles a day? Is that kind of
Yeah,
the deal?
that's what we were
And
doing. And I was doing 70% of those.
yeah,
Um,
that's a lot.
it
That's a lot of writing. It's a lot of
looking
research. That's a lot more than people realize.
looking back, it was quite a bit. It really was. Um, and yeah, put a lot of work into it and I was a freelance. So I mean, that's officially you're a freelance, even though you have a job and you run a thing. Um, yeah. Oh my God, this draft is
When
terrible.
when we first started, I had a website, developed a website for our brand, Seahawks Playbook podcast. And
Hmm.
I asked Keith, I said, Keith, you should write for me here on this website. You should
I
you
think
should
I
write, because then
I
we'll
think
have
I said
writing on our
hell no.
website. Yeah, and you did. You said no. And that was the conversation. That was it. That was like
Yeah,
beginning
because
and end.
when I finally got done and I hung it up and said I'm gonna retire as doing the sports writer thing. Um, when I did that, I was done because the hours, the time spent editing and just staring at a screen, writing copy and then just editing copy and whatever, um,
Yeah.
for how little pay came about from all of that.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't worth it, and I worked
Kind of like
myself.
now.
This
I
is
am
this is so
thankful.
much more fun though,
I
because
am
we get to focus
thankful
on the
for.
things we enjoy, and it can ignore the things I don't.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. I do appreciate that time frame, because that's how I first learned about you back in like 2015, 14, 15, or whatever. I knew about you, and
Hmm.
never really commented or anything. And then I started commenting because really I couldn't stand a couple of your takes. Now I was, I
You're not
was
alone. A lot of
really
people couldn't
nice.
stand my takes,
I
and I'm
was
okay
really
with that.
nice though. It was very civil and very like, there might be a different way to look at it. And over time, we got to know each other a little bit. And one day I had this wild idea um, that I wanted to start this show, and you were in on it right from the beginning. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that's very cool. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, because
And
it was one
sure
of those
enough,
things where I had tried to start a podcast um, earlier, and I'd set it up in a different way where it was going to be interview based. I was going to have a guest for every show and all of that, and it just was so much work. And also the podcasts that I listened to at the time weren't like that. They were like what we do. And stuff you should know. Um,
Yeah.
which is an
Conversational.
incredible, yeah, it's an incredible podcast that's been running for, I want to say 12 years or something, where they just pick a topic and it'll be like bats. And then they will research whatever the hell, and they get together and they talk about bats for half an hour. Uh, and I was like, they've got something figured out there. I'm like, I kind of let's do a sports version of that, Seahawks version of
Yeah.
that, where we pick something, we research it, we come prepared, and then we just talk.
I
And
like the idea of we show up and we literally don't talk. Like we'll text back and forth during the week, just random stuff, but we never really talk about the show. We never talk
yeah,
about the thing that we're going to talk about. We come into the show cold. Like I have no idea like what you're going to talk about or what you want to focus on or anything like that. We just kind of figure it out and it works. I don't know why, it just does.
yeah.
And I'm thankful
So
for that.
so I brought up I found the list of players that I wrote articles about that day, um, that I was talking about. Let me read you this list of players, and you'll realize why I don't remember any of them.
Wow.
Uh, Paul Richardson,
Mm-hmm.
Justin Britt, Cassius Marsh, Kevin Norwood, Kevin Pierre-Louis, Jimmy Staten, Garrett Scott, Eric Pinkins, Kiero Small.
I can barely remember the positions of those players. I do remember the names. I mean, you do, but there was a couple players there
So that was
that you mentioned where I have no clue what position they play.
2014. Kiero Small's last year in the league was 2014. Garrett Scott, Jimmy Staten did not ever play an
Garrett
NFL
Scott
game.
had the heart issue. He was an offensive lineman.
Yep. Yeah, Eric Pinkins was a red shirt his first year, so his tenure was 2015 and 2016. That's it. That's his entire career. Kevin Norwood, wide receiver, 2014, 2015. That was his entire career.
One of the fourth round failures, I think, right?
Yeah,
That we
absolutely.
had over the years.
And so that left Cassius Marsh, who had a 7-year career.
Defensive
Not
end.
bad.
Yeah.
Justin Britt,
And
the
from
tackle
UCLA.
guard center,
Yeah. Justin Britt,
who
of course.
actually had an 8-year career. Good
Good run.
decent career, although the first like 3 years were just
It was a slog for him.
it was yeah, they were on the trash heap. But then he settled in as a center and did pretty well. And then Paul Richardson, who played less than I thought.
Third round pick, I believe.
Second round pick.
Second round. Okay.
Second round pick 45 overall, played for 6 years, 2014 to 2019.
He was a Colorado guy, wasn't he?
He was. Good memory. And he was always hurt. Always hurt. And then he finally got a year where he didn't get hurt. He played really well for 1 year and then signed a deal with someone
Chicago?
back east.
I don't know.
Maybe it was Chicago. I don't know. Pittsburgh?
Or
I don't know. It was
Pittsburgh.
somebody.
Pittsburgh. Yeah, it was Pittsburgh.
It was somebody back east,
Pittsburgh.
got hurt in his first game, and then that was kind of the end of it. We didn't really hear from him much since. And that was too bad because he's a guy with tremendous talent, but just skinny, really.
And this is a great example. And we researched, independently. We didn't know each other then. At that time, you research it just as well as you research this. Given the technology and the websites that you could research and all that kind of stuff back then, seems like ancient times now. But it just goes to show you how difficult this business is. To predict, to play, to last. A guy that you wouldn't have guessed, Justin Britt, ends up having the longest career out of all those players that you mentioned. And
absolutely,
and one of the better players out of that. And it's crazy how it works.
And then
it just
a guy
is.
like Kevin Pierre-Louis, who you'd think, like, Seattle fans remember him poorly as a guy who missed a lot of tackles and never got on the field and whatnot. Played in 95 games and was the second best player by AV which is a pro football reference metric for impact, was the second best player on that out of that draft class.
Wow.
Behind Justin Britt.
Yeah.
Which that was a really bad draft class.
That was bad. Cassius Marsh, I thought, had some upside when we drafted him, but just never seemed to stick there. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Let's go get it. Let's go get the draft done. Then we've got real Seahawk players we're talking about from now on.
Mm-hmm. That'll be fun.
That'll be fun.
So after the draft, Bill and I will do we always do a recap of everything we saw. We will also do a separate show for all the undrafted free agents, which is basically a big free for all for terms of signing. So if you want information on who the hell the Seahawks were signing, because most of those people,
right,
nobody knows anything about.
Below the radar. Yep.
Yeah. We will do our research and come in and do that. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, definitely come back and we'll take care of you. Yeah.
Yeah. I can tell you what, if you're still hanging on with us at a minute or an hour 20, listening to some old war stories about past drafts, you're in on that show. Like,
yeah,
why not? Right.
Yeah. That's that. Right. You're one of our people, and we appreciate you very, very much.
All right. Find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platforms and our YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment. We appreciate all those. Got a couple of guest appearances coming up this weekend as well. You're just going to have to watch for social media on those and find out where we're going to be and what time. I think both of those shows will end up being live stream shows.
Yes.
And then we'll come back and do a recap show early in the week, maybe Sunday, maybe Monday or Tuesday. And that'll give us time to do the undrafted guys too. So, Okay, let's get out of here. Have fun and enjoy the draft. We'll see you next time. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.